they found him in a hole. A man once feared by millions, hiding in the dirt like a ghost trying to escape his own shadow. December 13th, 2003, the day the world saw the face of power stripped of pride. Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq, the self-proclaimed Lion of Babylon, captured not on a battlefield, but buried beneath the earth, bearded, broken, and silent. But before that moment, before the cameras flashed, before the world declared victory, there was the rise, there was the blood, there was the myth. To understand Saddam's capture, you have to understand what made him untouchable, and what made him fall. He was born in a small village near Tikrit in 1937. The Iraq he was born into was one of poverty, tribal loyalties, and political chaos. Saddam grew up fatherless, angry, and humiliated. A child who learned early that power was the only way to escape weakness. By the time he was a teenager, he was already drawn to violence, drawn to men who promised revolution. In his 20s, he joined the Ba'ath Party, a movement that dreamed of a strong, united Arab world. But for Saddam, ideology was never the point. Power was. He quickly rose through the ranks, not because of charm or intellect, but because of his ruthlessness. When the Ba'ath Party seized power in 1968, Saddam was the shadow behind the throne. He watched, waited, and when the time was right, he struck. In 1979, he took control. The moment was broadcast to the world. Saddam in a grand hall, cigarette smoke curling through the air, reading a list of names, his own party members, men accused of betrayal. One by one, they were dragged out, executed. By the end of the day, every man in that room understood. Iraq now belonged to Saddam Hussein. Under his rule, Iraq transformed, and so did he. He poured money into Baghdad, built palaces, monuments, and portraits of himself so large they cast shadows over entire neighborhoods. He controlled the press, the schools, even the whispers in the streets. Children learned to chant his name before they could write their own. But the same man who built highways and hospitals also built prisons and torture chambers. The same hands that shook those of world leaders signed death warrants without hesitation. To cross Saddam was to vanish. Sometimes you disappeared in the middle of the night, sometimes in broad daylight. It didn't matter. And yet, for a time, the world looked the other way, because Saddam was useful. In the 1980s, when Iran's Islamic Revolution threatened to spill across the Middle East, Saddam became the West's strongman, the enemy of their enemy. The US and other Western powers quietly supported him, providing weapons, intelligence, and money as he waged one of the bloodiest wars of the 20th century, the Iran-Iraq War. 8 years, 1 million lives lost, but Saddam emerged claiming victory, and in his mind, that made him invincible. He called himself the new Nebuchadnezzar, the modern Saladin, conqueror of the Arabs. He believed history would remember him not as a tyrant, but as a savior. Then came 1990. In a single reckless move, Saddam invaded Kuwait, believing the world would tolerate it, just as they had tolerated everything else. But this time, the world didn't look away. Operation Desert Storm followed. The US-led coalition drove his army out of Kuwait within weeks. Baghdad's skyline glowed with the fires of defeat. But Saddam survived. His regime held. He crushed uprisings, silenced dissent, and continued to rule with iron fists. Isolated, paranoid, and unchallenged inside his borders. For the next decade, Iraq lived under sanctions. Children starved, the economy collapsed, yet Saddam kept building palaces. He broadcast images of himself holding rifles, firing into the air, vowing revenge on America. To his people, he was both father and executioner. To the world, he became the face of defiance, a relic of Cold War arrogance that refused to die. But by the early 2000s, the tide had turned. After September 11th, America's fear had a new focus. In Washington, Saddam was painted as the next great threat, accused of building weapons of mass destruction, accused of sheltering terrorists. And though the evidence was thin, the decision had already been made. In March 2003, US forces invaded Iraq. Within weeks, Baghdad fell. Statues toppled. Crowds cheered. But Saddam vanished. For months, he was a ghost. Every whisper, every shadow in the desert could be him. The world's most powerful army couldn't find one man in a country it claimed to control. Operation Red Dawn. That was the name of the mission that finally caught up to him. December 13, 2003, after months of false leads and near misses, U.S. troops cornered a small farming village near his hometown of Tikrit. They searched 2 sites, codenamed Wolverine 1 and Wolverine 2. Under a small mud brick hut, buried beneath debris, they found a narrow hole covered by dirt and wood. Inside, a man. He was disheveled, unshaven, his beard gray, his clothes tattered. When soldiers pulled him out, he muttered, "I am Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq, and I want to negotiate." But there was no negotiation. The man who once commanded an empire now sat quietly in American custody. No grand speeches, no defiance, just silence. When the photos of his capture were released, Saddam's mouth inspected, his hair pulled. The world saw something it had never seen before: the fall of absolute power. For millions who had lived under his fear, it was justice. For others, it was humiliation, the final act of a once proud nation brought to its knees. He was later put on trial for crimes against humanity, accused of killing thousands of his own people, using chemical weapons, ordering mass executions. In 2006, he was sentenced to death and hanged at dawn. The video of his final moments spread across the world, defiant, still refusing to bow, but clearly utterly human. Power, the thing he spent his entire life chasing, ended in the quiet snap of a rope. But the story doesn't end there. Even in death, Saddam's shadow lingers. Iraq never truly healed. The power vacuum his fall created gave birth to something darker: sectarian violence, chaos, and eventually, the rise of ISIS. In trying to destroy one dictator, the world unleashed 1,000 new monsters. So what does Saddam's story teach us? Maybe it's that power built on fear can only ever end in fear. That a man who tries to control everything will, in the end, control nothing. And that history, no matter how brutal, has a strange way of balancing itself. They found him in a hole, not in a palace, not on a throne, but hiding from the same terror he once inflicted on millions. And maybe that's the truest measure of his reign. Not in the buildings he built or the wars he fought, but in the silence of the people he left behind. Because in the end, Saddam Hussein wasn't just captured by American soldiers. He was captured by the very ghosts of his own making, the fear, the rage, the hunger for power that consumed everything he touched. And as the desert winds still move across the ruins of his palaces, they whisper the same truth history has told us again and again. No empire lasts forever. No tyrant escapes his own shadow. And power, no matter how absolute, always ends the same way, in silence. That's it for today. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more weekly videos. Goodbye.